Okay, this lecture is going to be about Nietzsche and Dostoevsky, like they're having a debate. And for, a lot of the audience only knows me from nutrition, but just for what it's worth, I've been interested in literature and I've written a whole bunch of other books. I wrote this book, The Holy Grail of Wisdom Quotes. And, what is this, about 700 pages? And I've been collecting quotes since I was in my 20s. I've got thousands and thousands of pages of them. Also, I was very interested in the writing of Dostoevsky. And just to give you a little perspective, I bought all the translations of Brothers Karamazov and have gone through them to some extent. So this is something that is sort of a hobby of mine. And I often found that historical figures would be nicely contrasted for a debate. So that's what this is going to lead to. As far as introduction to Nietzsche, he lived from 1844 to 1900. He called himself the disciple of Dionysus, who was the Greek god of wine and theater and kind of wild behavior. And he sort of liked the pre-Socratics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, but was disillusioned with Socrates and Plato, who he saw kind of as wussies and wimping down the Greeks. And that's kind of where Plato was coming from, a more intellectual type of hero than the old-fashioned hero of the Iliad and the Odyssey. And so there are some things I like about Nietzsche. He promoted the idea of individualism and self-development, which I did like, but he later also sort of promoted tyranny. Nietzsche's idea of a hero was not somebody like Socrates or Plato, or he didn't like them. He liked someone like Napoleon, which of course is, sort of a tyranny. But let's start off with a little bit of an introduction to the individualism of Nietzsche. Okay, so these are all quotes by Nietzsche. It is my ambition to say in 10 sentences what other men say in whole books, what other men do not say in whole books. Great minds are skeptical. A mind that aspires to great things is necessarily skeptical. Art is the proper task of life, the stimulus to a good life. We have art so that we shall not die of reality. Make the development of yourself the creation of a work of art. You must be objective to see the flaws in the early versions of the work so you can recognize them and correct them. If the artist is not able to recognize and fix early flaws, then nothing good can be created. So long as you are praised, think only that you are not yet on your own path, but on that of another. Creating is the great salvation of suffering. The individual has always to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the group. So all this stuff about the development of one's own mind and individualism, how you have to choose your own path if you're ever going to do anything interesting versus there's always pressure to conform. Nietzsche continues, if you try it to be an individual, you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. The organizing idea that is destined to rule keeps growing deep down. It begins to command. Slowly it leads us back from side roads and wrong roads. It prepares single qualities and fitnesses that will one day prove to be indispensable as a means toward a whole. One by one it trains all subservient capacities before giving any hint of the dominant task, the goal, the aim, the meaning, to strive towards a higher goal. So what he's basically saying is you have to have higher goals that pull you, that energize you towards achievement. Otherwise, you'll just sort of drift. But if you do have those higher goals, wherever they pull you and take you, you'll eventually be able to move off onto other paths, having built those skills. Nietzsche continues, direct self-observation is not nearly sufficient for us to know ourselves. We need history, for the past flows on within us in 100 waves. A fully mature intellect loves the truth, even when it appears plain and simple, boring to the ordinary person, for they have noticed that truth tends to reveal its highest wisdom in the guise of simplicity. After this little introduction to Nietzsche, then we'll have the debate between him and Dostoevsky. Nietzsche continues. This is where he's talking about music. A scientific interpretation of the world as you understand might therefore still be one of the most stupid of all possible interpretations of meaning. That would be one of the poorest in meaning. This thought is intended for the ears and consciousness of the mechanists, who nowadays like to pass as philosophers and insist that materialism is the doctrine of the first and last laws, on which all existence must be based as the ground floor. But an essentially mechanical world would be essentially a meaningless world. Assuming that one estimated the value of a piece of music according to how much it could be counted, calculated, and expressed in formulas, how absurd would such a scientific estimation of music be? What would one have comprehended or understood or grasped of music? Nothing, really nothing of what music is would be explained by that. Nietzsche. That kind of reminds me of trying to treat a dietary disease with some other method. Okay, Nietzsche continues. There is a false saying, how can someone who can't save himself save others? Suppose I have the key to your chains. Why should your lock and my lock be the same? Nietzsche. Okay, now this is second part of this talk here, and it's going to be the debate between Nietzsche and Dostoevsky. In this corner, we have Friedrich Nietzsche, who calls himself the Antichrist. That's what he called himself. Nietzsche made it his mission to destroy Christianity. Nietzsche wanted to replace Christianity with art. He wrote his book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, to replace the Bible. Nietzsche wrote an autobiography of himself called Ecce Homo, which meant, Behold the Man, as spoken by Pontius Pilate, meaning that Nietzsche felt that he had replaced Christ in the world and in the history of the world, and that he had written the book, Thus Spake Zarathustra, which should be the Bible of the future, and that he should be the ruler, the new God of men. In a godless society, the ruler is a god. The Roman emperors were gods. Okay? I've also color-coded the highlighting that sort of yellow tends to be Nietzsche, blue tends to be the narrator, commentator, or other persons who make brief appearances, and the light red is Dostoevsky, the Russian. Okay, in this corner, Fyodor Dostoevsky, who lived from 1821 to 1881, the Russian Orthodox Christian. In 1860, 10% of Americans were slaves, but 90% of Russians were slaves or serfs. Dostoevsky was not an aristocrat, but he was also not a serf. He saw Russia breaking apart culturally, and he feared the consequences of a godless society. In 1869, Dostoevsky wrote a book called The Idiot. And it's kind of a stupid book, but it's also interesting. And it was also sad. It was about a Christ-like man who tried to save the Russian people. The man's name was Prince Leo Mishkin. And Leo stands for lion, but Mishkin stands for mouse. So it's a quite contrasting name. And Leo was a very good person. He went around trying to help people. He provided them with insights into simple truths. And what did he get for his behavior? His naivety and honesty offended people. Everywhere he went, they called him idiot, and they beat him and tried to kill him. He tried to save two lovely Russian ladies, one named Aglaya, the other Natasha. And so I always like those names with all those letter A's, very feminine. And, you know, whenever you hear a lot of A's in a word, it evokes feminine imagery, except for the word banana, of course. Anyways, Dostoevsky tells it like it is. Aglaya and Natasha rejected his advice. They destroyed themselves. And the poor little prince, Leo Mishkin, actually did end up sort of becoming an idiot. And he sank into despair. And he was sort of a fool, almost like a Don Quixote type of fool character. Okay, Nietzsche. Here is the debate now between Nietzsche and Dostoevsky. Nietzsche starts off. He who has a why to live can bear any how. To live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. Dostoevsky. The mystery of human life goes beyond just staying alive. It seeks something to live for. Nietzsche. Great intellects are skeptical. There are no facts, only interpretations. I cannot believe in a God who wants to be praised all the time. The strength of a person can be measured by how much truth he can tolerate. Or more precisely, to what extent he needs to have it diluted, softened, sweetened, muted, falsified. You ask, where has God gone? Well, I will tell you, God is dead, and we have killed him, you and I. What did we do when we unchained the earth from the sun? Whither is it moving now? Has it not become colder? Is more and more night not coming on all the time? How shall we console ourselves? I come too early. This event is still on its way. It has not yet reached the ears of men. Dostoevsky responds, if you were to destroy in mankind the belief in immortality, not only love, but every living force, that maintains the life of the world would at once be dried up. Moreover, everything would be immoral. Nothing would be unlawful, not even cannibalism. Nietzsche. God is dead, and you have killed him. Get over it. Dostoevsky. If there is no God, then everything is permitted, even cannibalism. Nietzsche. I philosophize with a hammer. Narrator. If God is dead, then there's no such thing as morality. Darwin and Spencer proclaim survival of the fittest. Nietzsche. Verily, I have often laughed at the weaklings who thought themselves good because they have no claws. Narrator. Paul Johnson, English historian who lived from 1928 to current. Quote, man owes his humanity to the notion of God, and if this notion disappears from his thoughts and his vocabulary, then humanity would disappear too, for man without God is a doomed creature. The history of the 20th century proves the view that as the vision of God fades, we first become more clever monkeys, and then we exterminate one another. Paul Johnson, English historian. Nietzsche continues, Christianity is the snake that has swallowed its own tail. Your churches are not churches. They are just tombs for a dead God. After coming in contact with a religious man, I always feel I must wash my hands. There is not enough love and goodness in the world for us to give any of it away to imaginary beings. Dostoevsky. Even those who renounce Christianity and criticize it, in their innermost being, they still try to follow the Christian ideal. No one has been able to create a higher ideal of man and virtue than the ideal given by Christ. Nietzsche. The New Testament is too rococo. Upon reading the New Testament, one feels as if they are reading a Russian novel. Mystical explanations are thought to be deep. The truth is they are not even shallow. A casual stroll through the lunatic asylum, it shows that faith does not prove anything. Dostoevsky. Do miracles create faith? Or does faith create miracles? Nietzsche. Christianity is the religion of pity. When one gives up on Christian belief, then one thereby deprives oneself of the right to Christian morality. Christianity is a religion of poor people and slaves, of illiterates. Why should a religion of inferior people control superior people? It is time to go beyond good and evil. I condemn Christianity. I am the Antichrist. Intermission with some commentary from the judges of the debate. First is Plato. He lived from 428 to 347 BC. He says, the best way to control the ignorant masses is with noble-sounding lies. Plato was the big proponent of noble lies to control the ignorant masses. William Durant, the American historian, he lived from 1885 to 1981, comments, the philosophes do not need religion, but the average man wants it. Religion tells him that his life is meaningful. The atheism of the philosophes leads to despair for the average man. So the philosophes were in France, before the French Revolution, and they pushed atheism big time, as did Voltaire, and, the French catastrophe is what followed. Here's Rip Van Winkle, sort of a character from a book by Irving. He says, the philosophers aren't the only ones who like religion. Rulers don't like religion. It's too emotional. If the rabble starts thinking that their lives have meaning, they might want more freedom or property, and that can be expensive. And here's an opinion from Joseph Stalin, the leader of Russia, who lived from 1879 to 1953. He said, the Communist Party cannot be neutral toward religion. The Communist Party stands for science, and all religion is opposed to science. Plant Man Prometheus. Religion and freedom of speech are the power of the poor. That's why rulers forbid religion and censor speech. Rulers do not want the ignorant masses to expect forgiveness or to have hope. And here's a comment from Nikita Khrushchev, Russian ruler in the 1960s. We have no use for the Gospels and the policy of the Gospels. If someone slaps you, just turn the other cheek? No. We have shown that anyone who slapped us on our cheek would get his head kicked off. Nikita Khrushchev. Okay, Plant Man Prometheus comments. The rulers want the masses to be subliterate laborers. They don't want them to be self-righteous, liberal arts, hyper-educated types. Rulers prefer Darwinian atheism because with Darwinian atheism, the people are just talking primates, talking apes. Talking apes do not have any rights, none. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who lived from 1918 to 2008. The reason all of this happened, Stalin killed 65 million Russians, is because the people had forgotten God. Commentary from additional judges. Charles Leibniz, philosopher and mathematician from 1646 to 1716. He said, "There is only God or nothingness." T.S. Eliot, sort of an American and an English writer. He lived from 1888 to 1965, and he said, "If you will not have God, and he is a jealous God, then you should pay your respects to Stalin." Plant Man Prometheus. Rulers prefer the populace to be passive and dull, like cows, which works well because most people prefer to live like cows. Martin Luther comments. Martin Luther lived in Germany. He was the founder of the Reformation. He lived from 1483 to 1546. And he said, "The ordinary person, especially in the villages, knows absolutely nothing. They live like simple cattle." Friedrich Nietzsche, who did love the Renaissance but hated Martin Luther, said, "Martin Luther killed the Renaissance." Plant Man Prometheus. Darwinian atheism makes the ruler become God. If there is no religion, then the ruler is God. Darwinian atheism enables the ruler to do whatever they want, like eradicate unwanted ethnic groups, eugenics, polygamy, slavery, pedophilia, sadism, organ harvesting from humans, whatever they want. Their word is God in that society. Carl Jung, who lived from 1875 to 1961, comments, "In order to free the sovereign from restrictions, it tries to cut the ground out from under the religions. To prevent the individual from relying on anything but itself, it is possible to have an alternative point of view only when there is a reference point outside the mainstream. The religions that give or claim to give such a standard thereby enable the individual to exercise his judgment and his power of decision in ways outside the standard accepted way. The religions teach that there is another authority, one that is opposed to that of the world." Alexander Solzhenitsyn again. "The generations now coming out of Western schools are unable to distinguish good from bad. Even those words are unacceptable. This causes impaired thinking ability. Just as King Midas turned everything to gold, Stalin turned everything to mediocrity. Atheism was at the core of the entire Soviet system. Atheism is what makes it possible. Atheism is what makes it possible. To do evil, a human being must first of all believe that what he is doing is good. This ideology, that is what gives evil doing its long-sought justification and gives the evildoer the necessary steadfastness and determination." Carl Jung comments, "The decisive question for man is he related to something infinite or not? Among my patients over age 35, they all had a problem finding a religious outlook on life. Every one of them had fallen ill because he had lost what the living religions of every age have given their followers, and none of them has really been healed who did not regain his religious outlook. Religion is a basic human need." Okay, part 2 of the debate between Nietzsche and Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky starts off by saying, "God and the devil are fighting for the heart of men." Nietzsche, "I will believe in your Redeemer when Christians look more redeemed." Dostoevsky, "What is the use of Christ's words unless we set a good example? We are all responsible for everyone, and I am more responsible than anyone." Nietzsche, "Your God is dead, and you have killed him." Dostoevsky, "If someone proved to me that Christ is outside the truth, then I should prefer to remain with Christ than with the truth. If you drive God from the earth, we shall shelter him underground. Voltaire, one of the judges, makes a comment. If God did not exist, we would have to invent him. I want my doctor and my tailor to believe in God so they don't rob me. Now the Grand Inquisitor appears. The Grand Inquisitor is a character from the book Brothers Karamazov, and a lot of people think that's the best book chapter ever written in any book. And it's rather incredible. I've read all the translations. I think the translation by Constance Garnett is the best of the Dostoevsky translations. It's sort of the most true to the biographies of Dostoevsky that I've read, and the other things that he's written. Okay, the Grand Inquisitor speaks. Why hast thou come to hinder us? For thou hast come to hinder us, and thou knowest that. But dost thou know what will be tomorrow? I know not who thou art, and care not to know whether it is thou or only a semblance of him. But tomorrow I shall condemn thee, and burn thee at the stake as the worst of heretics. And the very people who have today kissed thy feet, tomorrow, at the faintest sign from me, they will rush to heap up the embers of thy fire. Knowest thou that? For 15 centuries we have wrestled with thy freedom, but now it is ended and over for good. Today men are more persuaded than ever that they have perfect freedom. Yet they have brought their freedom to us and laid it humbly at our feet. Dost thou know that the ages will pass, and humanity will proclaim by the lips of their sages that there is no sin? There is only hunger, and we alone shall feed them in thy name, declaring falsely that it is in thy name. In the end, they will lay their freedom at our feet and say to us, make us your slaves, but feed us. Okay, commentary from the judges again. Plant Man Prometheus. Smart people like freedom, but the Grand Inquisitor continues. By insisting on freedom of choice, you have limited salvation to only thousands of people. But what about the millions of people who cannot handle freedom? You make a mockery of them. Why hast thou come to hinder us? We have corrected thy work and have founded it on mystery and authority. And men rejoiced that they were again led like sheep. We shall persuade them that they will only become free when they renounce their freedom to us and submit to us. Thou shalt see that obedient flock, who at a sign from me will hasten to heap up the hot cinders about the pile on which I shall burn thee for coming to hinder us. Silicone Man. That's right. The average man doesn't care about freedom. He doesn't want the vegan diet. The average man doesn't care about books and history. He doesn't care about the ancient Greeks or the Romans or the Renaissance. The average man wants beer and pizza. He wants social media on his phone and TV. That's it. He's just a talking ape. Plant Man Prometheus. We are more than that. We are created in the image of God. Silicone Man. You can't prove that. All the biology teachers in all the high schools and all the colleges, they say that man is just a talking ape. Plant Man Prometheus. That is because they will get fired if they mention intelligent design or creation. Silicone Man. Freedom is expensive. It leads to chaos. Look at all the wars between countries. The only hope for peace is a globalist society where most of the people are subliterate laborers. Plant Man Prometheus. Well, could we at least have a health aristocracy so that organic vegan food is available? Could we at least be allowed to have books about history, philosophy, religion, and true science?